automation is so powerful. We talk about automation, and by automation, we could simply mean, deploying a probe and configuring an auto deployment of our agents. That is automation. When I kind of think about automation, my eye is kind of drawn to Automation Manager and automating tasks that that I find myself doing repetitively as such. So when I would have demoed the product in the past to kind of people unfamiliar with N-central and unfamiliar with Automation Manager, I would always kind of say to those people that are in attendance, find out, sit down as a team, sit down as a group and identify what you do repetitively all the time as such. Whether that is, a deployment of software applications to a group of devices, or whether that is steps that you take to troubleshoot issues, for example. Make a list of items and group them together and say, okay, we always do this, or if there's a printer issue, for example, we always do X, or if there is slowness on the PC, for example, we always do Y, for example. Or anytime we get a new customer, we install 7-zip on the actual machine and we deploy Chrome, for example, and we do all these manually as such. Identify what tasks you're doing manually now, and then see, is there a way that you can automate them so that when you onboard those new customers, software deployment becomes automatic, for example. Or when it comes to supporting customers, when it comes to troubleshooting those steps, you have a policy that automates certain troubleshooting steps. So I'm not saying automation can cure all illnesses, for example. What you might do is you might speed up the remediation process. So if you have a problem and if you have a policy that does the first 7 troubleshooting steps and it's still a problem and it hasn't fixed it, then you can start at the 8th step rather than having to do the first 7 steps manually as such. So in terms of where to start with automation, start with the simple stuff. Find out what you do on a repetitive basis, whether that's a remediation process, whether it's a deployment process, and then obviously see what you can obviously automate out of that and leverage that. With automation, what I find is once you start doing automation, the more you do with it, the more you'll actually use it, because you'll think of new ideas when it comes to automation as such. So just to give you some simple examples, Richard, I'll give you, I'm going to go back to basic policies as such, but we'll go with one of the most basic policies here. And, I'm going to pick something that came up countless times when I worked on the help desk side of things, people not being able to print in the network printer. Now, everyone's going to roll their eyes at this and stuff like that. But, this is a prime example of, automating steps you take manually. So someone rings up and says, I can't print in a network printer. What we typically would have done in the past is we would have gone, okay, can I remote control onto your PC, which disrupts the end user. We then launch the services tab on the end user's device, and we check to see if the print spooler service is running. If the print spooler service is running, what we would then do is we'd stop the print spooler service, we then delete whatever is stuck in the spool printers folder, and then we restart the print spooler service as such. If we logged onto the machine and found the print spooler service isn't running, we might simply go straight to the spool printers folder and then delete what's stuck in there and restart the service as well. Now, this is a really basic form of automation, but these are manual steps that we take all the time, and rather than having to do them manually, we can actually use something like Automation Manager to build those processes in, so that when we go to look at this issue on the device, this could already have triggered, and obviously if it's still a problem, then we can investigate it further from there as well. That's an example of how you can use Automation Manager from a remediation point of view, Richard. From a kind of project point of view, maybe you have to deploy a certain software application. I had a scenario a few years ago with a partner over on this side of the world where they needed to upgrade PowerShell on about 1,000 devices because of an update to the software application they were using. And first of all, we created a little automation policy that told us what version of PowerShell was running. It provided an output to tell us the version number, and we used that to filter to see how bad the situation was. And when we looked at it, we had over 1,000 devices. We're going, okay, we can't physically update 1,000 devices manually to the new PowerShell version, so we need to come up with an alternative. So what we did is we extended on the script from there. So we found out all the devices that equals PowerShell version 2. And from there, then what we did is we got the OS type. So we needed to find out, was it Windows 7? Was it Server 2008? Because it was going to depend on what download we used to obviously update PowerShell. And then from there, we needed to find out the architecture. Was it 32-bit or was it 64-bit? And then once we got the architecture version, then we needed to obviously check to see if a folder exists or create a new folder. And then what we did is we downloaded the relevant installer for the Windows version and the architecture version, and then we created a little PowerShell script that manually pushed that out as such. So by doing this, we were able to build a policy that we could then run through N-central over the course of a weekend to automatically update 1,000 machines from PowerShell version 2 to PowerShell version 4 at the time as such. So when we zoom this out, we can see the different legs and the different branches of the tree here, depending on the version and the OS, for example, what stages we take. So this is a really prime example of how we started with a simple idea and we built on it then to obviously address an issue that we're having en masse as well. So to go back to your question, Richard, is where do you start really? Is start by having a conversation internally, identify where the work is, and then start looking at what's available within N-central, bearing in mind lots of these policies that you might want to use are already available in the cookbook, and then build from there and go from there as well.